very popular deck, been doing well at the top tables. But let's go. Two excellent players here in round 14 at Portland.
Here we go. Round 14, the winner can lock up a spot at either 10-0-5 or 11-2-2 potentially. So this is a big match for both players. A loss puts you out of contention here for top 8 cut. So just win or go home without advancing to the next section. Dan starting off excellently here. Battle VIP pass. Looking through the deck, we'll note that that Radiant Greninja is unavailable, but it's sort of a weird card to have down as a bench spot because while both players are playing Path to the Peak, I guess it's a card that you're going to want to play more than your opponent, but you're not going to get full usage out of that if you are playing Path to the Peak down, or you've got to really be careful on when you're using that Radiant Greninja's concealed cards ability.
Yep, so Dan just looking through the initial search here off the Battle VIP Pass. It's the card you want to see in your opening hand, of course. Can only use it during your first turn, but very powerful for an item card. Search your deck for up to 2 basic Pokemon, put them right onto your bench. This is really the engine that gets decks going in the early stages of the game. And Dan just going to use this opportunity to take a look through the prize cards, see what's there, and maybe adjust accordingly. But yeah, I think this is a somewhat classic matchup we've seen a lot of throughout the last year plus in the standard format. Giratina VSTAR going up against Mew VMAX. Lots of different things can happen in this matchup, of course. You do have the ability to get that one-hit knockout with the Star Requiem VSTAR power on Giratina VSTAR. Can take 3 prize cards on a Mew VMAX at some point, but then the question is always, where do the other 3 come from?
And a great start here from Dan. Double Battle VIP Pass, even has a Nest Ball to hold in the hand. Just like that, no flower selectings yet to be used, and a bench full of Pokemon. This is Giratina's dream start here in game number 1. See if Dan has any way to continue to use flower selectings, prioritizes getting down those Giratina V. Why is it so important to get those 2 down on the first turn of the game?
I think when you're going first, it's probably not as important to get them out on the first turn. But yeah, once your opponent is able to get Mew VMAX, they can just target 1 down, knock it out. You obviously need to have them in play for a turn before you can evolve into the VSTAR. And once you evolve up, you get to 280 HP. It's a much different knockout for the Mew VMAX deck versus the 220 HP for Giratina V. So, you know, it is a big advantage to get them down if you can evolve both of them up quickly. You know, your opponent only has so many power tablets, so many damage modifiers. But, you know, very strong start here from Dan. Got some cards in the Lost Zone. Got a pass to the Peak down. Played Battle VIP Pass. Now it's going to be on Vance to do something here.
Did see 2 of those Battle VIP Pass in the prize cards. So those are going to be 2 less available on this first turn. Now, it's not too relevant when you have ways to search them out specifically like Cramomatic Heads or Forest Sealstone. Those cards not available for Vance right away. It does play this Ultra Ball, getting rid of double Turbo Energy and one of those Judge. And this is sort of the advantage of this double Turbo deck. You're not filling your deck slots with things like Fusion Energy and these supportive attacking Pokemon. You can play more disruptive cards like this Judge, which sort of acts as both, right? It's disruption, but it's also a draw supporter. And when you're under Path Lock, you need to see as many cards as possible so that you can get rid of this Stadium card and get this Fusion Strike system engine running.
Yep, so Vance, it doesn't look like has a super strong hand. You know, we'll just try to grab another Pokemon here. Might have to play a Judge to get out of this, and we'll see where we go from here. Both these players have very different accomplishments, I would say. Vance, you know, kind of broke out at the World Championships. He can't have much better breakout than winning the biggest tournament of the year.
For sure.
Dan played a lot during kind of the online era, Players Cup. Did have a, you know, legendary Players Cup moment, which he does not enjoy us bringing up, so I won't, I won't bring that up again.
Can't bring it up for him now.
But yeah, 2 players whose stocks have really risen over the last couple of years, and no surprise to see both of them battling it out deep into this tournament. You know, hoping to fight for position to make it to the top 8, and you know, I'm sure both these players are hoping to add regional champion to their resume.
So these are big 4 cards for Vance. This is the prime turn to get these Pokemon into play. And wow, that's actually a very solid 4 cards. Battle VIP Pass, and even finds the Forest Sealstone as a out, maybe not even this turn, but the following turn. That Battle Pass, though, a big grab, can bench another Genesect, can put another Mew V into play. And now all of a sudden, things are rolling here for Vance on turn 1.
Yeah, you can see Dan and Vance having some friendly chatter at the table as well. Always love to see that. So Dan mentioned during his turn, I'm not trying to get a game loss on stream. I'm going to play everything properly, have a clean game. And then basically congratulating Vance. He's like, oh, there you go. Good job. We got a Battle VIP pass.
Some friendly sportsmanship back and forth. Now, Vance did draw into that Forest Sealstone. I think he's just debating whether or not it's worth to play down now. And we know Dan isn't playing anything like the Lost Vacuum to remove it, but it is a risk if you're going to just put your only Path to the Peak option in play. And speaking of disruption, Dan also really not playing anything besides Iono right now to disrupt. So I think Vance is just wondering, is it worth taking this risk, or am I content with this turn? And it seems to be that Vance is content with how this board is set up, and now it's back on Dan to see what he can put together. And does have to get rid of that Giratina VSTAR. Now, as you talked about, getting that HP in play is important, but you know what's more important? Playing Colress's Experiment.
Yep, getting cards in the Lost Zone. If you don't do that, your deck isn't very strong. Yeah, Vance, I think, had a very interesting decision there. Like you said, did have the Forest Sealstone in hand. Could have used it, got a Lost Vacuum, got rid of the Path to the Peak, and then use Fusion Strike system, draw a bunch of cards, try to get further set up. But realizes there's not really much more I can do on this turn. Until I can evolve to Mew VMAX, I'm not really going to get an attack off. So is it even worth doing that and potentially putting myself in an awkward situation for the next turn? Vance deciding, nope, I'll just play a little slow. I'll hold on to this and guarantee that next turn I'll be able to draw through my deck and hopefully set up a strong turn 2.
An interesting choice here for Dan to play this Mirage Gate.
Oh.
Now, with both of these Giratina V in play, like you said, next turn, Vance is in a prime position to start attacking with Mew VMAX and target it down. I mean, what do you think about thinning these energies out here with Mirage Gate if you're not attacking? And I mean, both of these Giratina Vs are not going to evolve this turn with the cards that Dan has access to.
I think you're worried about Judge, hand disruption. So I think there's some merit to just saying, you know what, I'll play this Mirage Gate now. If my opponent plays Boss's Orders and knocks out this Giratina V, then I get to keep my hand. If they play Judge, at least I get to keep these energy in play. So I think that's pretty reasonable line of play to take.
So Vance's second turn will begin. Now that Genesect V is still in the active spot. Not what you want your attacking Pokemon to be. And right away, Forest Sealstone comes down, Star Alchemy used, and it will be that Lost Vacuum, the card of choice for Vance. Get then a card out of this hand that Vance maybe isn't able to play or doesn't want to play down this turn. Remove Path to the Peak in play. Now, to note, it will put Dan up to now 8 cards in the Lost Zone since it's not discarded, it's placed into the Lost Zone. And now Fusion Strike system on play, and a great final card there, Boss's Orders, bringing this Giratina V up. Still does need to find a few cards, but an excellent first couple of plays here for Vance.
Yep, big one is going to be a switch or double turbo energy to get this Genesect V out of the active spot. There are 2 switch carts. Just needs to find one of those. Also need to find, Power Tablet or Choice Belt. One of those can get this knockout on the Giratina V, and then Vance will jump out to a 2 prize card lead. But it does mean that Dan gets to keep his hand. He's built up a reasonable number of cards in hand. So, you probably expect something bad to happen on this turn, right? You either expect you're going to get judged or one of your Pokemon's going to get knocked out. So I don't think you're really surprised by how this plays out.
I think Vance is deciding how he wants to play this out. We'll actually use Ultra Ball to get rid of that second copy of Boss's Orders. So no longer available, but we do actually see the Pal Pad in hand. And I think the choice now is, do you want to bring back both Boss's Orders or maybe Boss and another supporter? Now, it's sort of a double-edged sword here. You are recovering these resources, but these aren't cards that you necessarily want to draw into off of this Fusion Strike system. But I think Vance understands there's plenty of outs in the deck. Double Turbo Energy can be attached to Retreat. And one of these switching cards, like the Switch card, can be used to get out of the active spot. I think Vance is okay putting some of these cards in the deck to thin the current hand out and have those resources available for later. So this will be the final Fusion Strike system. 5 cards used. Do we see a way to get this Genesect out of the active spot? You see Vance just sort of giving a little bit of a smirk there, just like, come on. 3 power tablet, is that? Oh, it looks like 2 of the Fusion Strike energies, which usually great against Giratina if they're playing the Spiritomb, but with the inability to play any of those down, we're just going to be seeing the Genesect stay in the active spot, supporter wasted for the turn, and advantage in Dan's court now.
Yeah, no, heard Dan say, "Oh, sorry about that."
That's gotta hurt, right? You dig so far, and your opponent's like, better luck next time, man.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Feel really bad for you that you missed the knockout. Anyway, I'm going to take my turn now.
Yeah, I'm just going to start with Colress's experiment. I'm just going to put some more cards in the lost zone.
Yeah.
Let's see what the choice is. Now, with 3 Comfey in play and 1 here off of this Colress, I feel like it's your easy choice. Just get rid of that. I think the question now is, do you value having a 3rd Giratina V potentially, or do you value maybe keeping this Sableye around? We will see the water energy hit the lost zone, excuse me. And there it is, 3rd Giratina V coming down into play. The whole squad is here, as well as the attachment for turn. You hear Dan say, "Yeah, I've got a really good deck." Not really, maybe expecting this Giratina V to stay in the active spot, and that's something I've heard from players this weekend. Of this Pokemon getting bossed up and not much happening. It's just going to be this Shred. Still relevant damage though, 160 on this Genesect, but not, I'm sure, what Dan wanted to do on this turn.
Yeah, you can clean that up later with Sableye Lost Bind. And if your opponent doesn't find a switch again, I guess they can work out. But yeah, you do kind of see the 2 different personalities of these players. Dan, happy to chat it up, having a good time, let's talk about everything. And Vance is very locked in, focused, doesn't want any of this side conversation. Is just here to grind out victories with this Mew VMAX deck.
He's not here to play games, he's here to win games. And Dan's here to do a little bit of both, so I like the back and forth between both these players. We're sharing some banter back and forth, and that's what the best part of Pokemon. We've got all the line on the stake, right? Winner makes it into top. I mean, Dan was in this situation. This exact round is the same round we streamed him at San Antonio. Won his round, took an intentional draw the final round, made it into top cut. So we'll see how things pair out. 4 cards for both players. We do see double turbo energy, and I think Vance maybe might not want to take the risk. I mean, there's a play where you just hold it in hand and Fusion Strike system first, but Vance understands Path to the Peak can always be an option later on. Might as well maximize my total amount of cards drawn as well as this heavy ball. Don't think we'll see this grab anything unless maybe if there's a Pokemon you could burn Lost Vacuum, but that's such a valuable resource later on in the game. I'm not sure it's worth just drawing an extra couple cards here.
That previous turn for Vance, also a little bit frustrating because a power tablet was wasted. Those are very important as you get to the later stages of the game against those big Pokemon VSTAR with 280 HP. So then you start to think, how am I going to get multiple knockouts? Your easiest, cleanest path to victory with this Mew VMAX deck is to knock out 3 multiple prize Pokemon. Knock out 3 Pokemon V or VSTAR in this case in 3 attacks. If you can do that, hey, you're going to win a lot of the time. If you have to take an extra turn to, 2-hit knockout a Giratina VSTAR, gives your opponent an extra turn, and it really takes away the advantage you have of this big 310 HP Mew VMAX that ultimately gives up 3 prize cards when it's knocked out.
Interesting choice for Vance there, playing the Hisuian Heavy Ball and keeping the Mew V that was prized. Not doing anything with it, and now we'll just play the Lost Vacuum. Not really for any positive effect besides just thinning the hand out, getting rid of a Forest Seal Stone that's no longer needed. Ability's already been used, that Star Alchemy V-Star power, and it looks like did find the power tablet for this turn. So big find there for Vance. Does still have 1 more Fusion Strike system, but your goal's achieved for the turn. Cross Fusion Strike can copy Techno Blast, and just more cards to throw down into play, I guess. Vance will finally take this 2-prize knockout, go down to 4 prizes. Took a little bit of damage on the Genesect in the process. Did burn that power tablet, as you mentioned. And the question is, Dan, now down to a 4-card hand because of that judge. How will he respond to the pressure that Vance is now putting on to his board?
Yep. Vance was saying, really wanted to draw a choice belt. Understandable. But, all right, now the question becomes, what is Dan's path to victory? Obviously, at some point, you want to Star Requiem, knock out a Mew VMAX. But how do you get the last 3 prize cards? That one Genesect V on the bench is pretty easy. You can use Sableye's Lost Mine, You can even counter catcher it out and attack with a Cramorant, something like that. But then where does the last knockout come from? And that's what Dan has to figure out here. He was kind of gifted a turn when Vance, missed that turn 2 knockout. And now it's up to him to figure out, what gives me the best chance to close out this game, knowing that eventually, my opponent is going to play something like INO, Judge, going to disrupt my hand and make it difficult for me to get that final knockout. So how do I put myself in a position to be as disruption-proof as possible?
Found lots of cards there. Flower selecting Colress's Experiment, but this hand is just really awkward. Has to manual attach to this Comfey to retreat, but and now that's no longer an option. Yeah, I mean, you've got a pair of cards here. You might as well just play them out. Switch card hitting the Lost Zone, switch card hitting the discard pile. But digging and dig, you kind of can dig all you want, but with has to throw away Mirage Gate. Found another pair of cards there. Look, we're not.
Yeah, double switch card and then double Mirage Gate. Yikes. That's, one Mirage Gate in the discard, one in the Lost Zone. How many resources you got left? Had to attach for the turn already. Did throw away the Cramorant. There's only one in the deck.
We're unfortunately just going to pass over to you.
Oh.
Hey, listen, at least the Giratina players are embracing that their deck is good at this point. So.
And I'm going to pass to you because I have a good deck, which he said repeatedly throughout this match so far. You're seeing the not-so-great side of the Giratina VSTAR deck.
So action's back on Vance. Is now gifted sort of a return turn at this point. So bonus turn, that is. There's that choice belt that he mentioned last turn. Will hit the field, allowing this Mew VMAX to do 30 more damage to all of Vance's Pokemon. Now, we did see a retreat and switch card. So this is where shortcutting things sort of gets a little bit tricky because I'm sure Vance wants to heal some of that damage off for sure.
Dan kindly offering to let Vance pick that one as the.
And that's actually really relevant too because now it means that 2 Lost Mine won't knock out 2 Genesect Vs. So.
Yep. All right, I think Vance digging for a boss's orders on this turn. Take out that Giratina V. You just got to knock out the VSTAR and the game's over.
Yeah, but the issue at this point is if something like Star Requiem removes this choice belt out of play, there's only 2 power tablets left in the deck, and that's not enough that you need to take a knockout on this Giratina VSTAR. And we could be seeing the narrative we've seen all weekend of Giratina VSTAR falling behind early, but potentially making a comeback later on in the game. Will be boss's orders, though, bringing Giratina V up into the active spot. The knockout is already there. Cross Fusion Strike Techno Blast is sort of reset at this point. Retreat to the bench, switch card back into the active spot, and everything from here is just icing on top of the cake. Do see another Mew VMAX, and normally might as well just evolve some or get some cards in play, but I think Vance maybe wants to keep Psychic Leap online, decides to cut that off as an option. How do you feel about that in this spot?
I think it's fine. I think Vance is pretty favored from this point as long as he draws the cards to attack every turn. I think Dan's going to need some kind of, late game heroics to pull this off. Something like a counter catcher to strand a Genesect active and then use Sableye to kind of hit the bench and try to win that way. Dan is now the one who's a turn behind. You start off with the Roxanne. This deck does play Path to the Peak. You can pair the hand disruption with Path to the Peak. Then maybe Vance stumbles a bit. But it is clearly an uphill battle for Dan in all ways. Down 4 prize cards. Down a lot of resources. Hasn't really been able to do much. The only attack that's been used is Shred, which is not where you want to be.
Still needs to find a way to attack this turn. There's no energy on board. There is the Giratina VSTAR.
That too, yeah.
Even if Vance doesn't find a way to get out of this, what is getting out of it if you're not applying pressure on your own? So let's see these 6 cards here. There is the Path to the Peak, but no Mirage Gate or Super Rod to bring these energies back. So he's going to be a big 2 cards off flower selecting, and it's really not what you're looking for. I mean, you can play the escape rope, but I think Vance is more than happy to save the choice belt on this Mew VMAX and bring up a different Pokemon to be attacked if Dan can even put together a knockout this turn.
Yep. I think, Dan knows he's got to attack this turn to probably have a chance in the game. So we'll just go ahead and play the escape rope. Vance, just throwing up a free retreater. No point in taking a risk there. And yeah, just Path to the Peak. Get your attack off this turn. Hopefully do something get something off the prize cards, and I don't know, just try to figure out some way to win.
So we'll be Lost Mine. There are 10 cards in the Lost Zone, and we're going to actually see a smart choice here. Splitting 3 on each of these, and it's going to put that in Lost Impact range. And what a top deck. Finds Lost Vacuum. And that's the worst card you want to see on your opponent's side here if you're Dan.
World champ difference.
It's that easy. Just win the world championships, and the cards will just come to you if you will it.
So yeah, the Lost Vacuum will allow Vance.
This is what do you think about this play of sort of bluffing, holding this Lost Vacuum and making the hand seem like it's not so good?
Yeah, I think if you look at it and say, I don't think I can actually win this turn, it's better to just hold on and make it look like your hand is weak. You also saw the Ino go into the Lost Zone for Dan in the last turn, so you were feeling pretty good about not getting your hand disrupted. So yeah, I think smart play from Vance. You know, we've seen a couple times where he just holds on to some resources. I think a lot of players would just, you know, play out their cards, hope for the best.
There's 7 cards in my deck, just so you know.
But yeah, we've seen some excellent patience.
We'll grab a Roxanne.
Okay, another Roxanne though.
We will.
A nice combination here before. Playing the Super Rod, bringing these energy cards back, and Dan may have potentially set something up at this position. With those 3 damage counters placed on both VMAX, it means that Dan can put enough energy cards into play. Lost Impact can take this knockout, and no matter what Pokemon comes into the active next turn, Star Requiem doesn't care. It's going to take a knockout on any of those.
We're at 6 in there. Yeah. We're just going to Mirage.
Dan making sure he doesn't deck out when he plays this Roxanne. There's another Super Rod in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's going to put himself in the best possible position to win this game still. This is what you can get with Path to the Peak and hand disruption. So another Roxanne. Dan will get that 3 prize knockout. And like you said, just leave the Star Requiem up for next turn and say, hey, if you don't win, I got the game on board. Good luck.
And it's even harder because you see that 1 copy of Escape Rope is in the Lost Zone. So you can't even play something like a draw supporter to draw some cards and find that as an out.
Yeah, I think you can still find double power tablet, right? He's got the choice belt.
Yeah, that's true. The last 2 power tablets can be found maybe, and what looked to be a pretty bad situation for Dan has pulled this out with another Roxanne to disrupt the hand. Vance's bluff not paying off, just getting the hand disrupted yet again.
Let's see what it is.
And here we go, big top deck. What's the card? It's a Feather Ball, and I don't think there's anything that Vance can do. There's almost 20 cards in the Lost Zone here for Dan. Star Requiem more than happily filled up. I mean, you can't even retreat into anything. Star Requiem will take the knockout on any Pokemon. And just like that, Dan stealing a game away from Vance, going up 1-0, putting himself 1 game away from potentially locking up a spot at Top Cut here in Portland.
Well played by Dan. He does have a good deck. Look at that. He's been saying it the whole time.
He was just slow rolling it on us.
He wasn't lying. He has a good deck.
His deck is maybe a little bit slower than everybody else's deck, but that doesn't make it any less special, all right?
Yeah. So that was a great way to kick off round 14. Really back and forth. It looked like Vance had that one wrapped up, but the repeated hand disruption, Path to the Peak, it finally sticks at the end. Vance, missed an early opportunity to get a knockout and just fell short. Dan saying, who needs Spirit Tooth?
Yeah, I keep thinking back to the Forest Seal Stone being used, and that's one of the cards that the later you keep it around, you give yourself that get out of jail free card. But with how Vance drew in that turn 1 Path to the Peak was just kind of forced to use that to get out of path early on. The earlier you can sort of avoid using that star power, the more options you have. And early game was Vance. Gas going on, foot on the pedal, taking these knockouts on the Giratina. Things got a little bit tricky when that knockout was missed. You have to think maybe that extra power tablet could have changed things if Vance was maybe able to take those prize cards earlier, dig through the deck, see some more options, and it was the Lost Mine and a really smart play there from Dan, setting those 3 damage counters up. I think this is a completely different game if Dan doesn't make that decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, Dan was down 4 prize cards. He made the full comeback there. That was just a masterclass of kind of patience on both sides, figuring out best opportunities to make moves when you can decide to relax a little bit. And then Dan struck at the right moment, found that final Roxanne for the hand disruption, and And that is what led him to victory.
2 lost vacuum in the prizes for Vance. I mean, that's a really crucial card. We do see 1 path to the peak in prizes for Dan. And it's that interaction between both cards. This is a big flip. Flip heads! Vance saying he needs it. Look, we've been saying this all weekend. If you just flip heads, the game is yours, Kyle. It can just be that easy. And I mean, no other deck in the format embraces it that much than this Mew VMAX deck. As Battle VIP Pass will be the grab. Getting these Fusion Strike Pokemon into play. We could see Genesec's Fusion Strike system continue to draw some more cards. Oh, yeah, that's it, actually. Just playing the Battle Pass.
Yeah, if Vance flipped tails on that, he was doing nothing on that turn. He was just going to attach a double turbo to the active and pass. So huge heads to kick off the game, but did have to discard a power tablet. So it was potentially costly.
Now, what does Dan have access to at this point? No Battle VIP Pass or ways to find basic Pokemon off of these 5 cards from the Culver's experiment.
It's fine. He's got concealed cards.
It always finds it, right? Well, there's a Giratina V in the hand at minimum, but big 2 cards here. What do we see off concealed cards? Ooh, this is really tough. I mean, you could put the Giratina V into play, but now you have to ask, is it worth it to put this into the active and Abyss Seek? And it is going to be worth putting it in the active.
Okay.
It does put the path in play, but this is a big advantage here for Vance now. This is a completely different game with this heads flip.
Oh, there's the Battle VIP Pass.
A little too late, though, unfortunately. So the doors have swung wide open here for Vance. Finds the Choice Belt and the Lost Vacuum to get rid of this path to the peak and follow it up with Disrupting Hands. Dan's huge hands. A little bit of a tongue twister there. My bad.
Dan says, that's bad for me. I agree. This, it's still not guaranteed Vance gets a knockout. There's only 3 Pokemon in play. The Fusion Strike system is not very strong, but if he's able to find, a couple more ways to get basic Pokemon in play. Obviously, if this turn ends with Mew VMAX knocking out Genesect V, I think there's a pretty decent chance Dan would just concede the game and move on to Game 3. But we'll see. Important 4 cards here for Vance.
Okay. Oh, wow. Mew VMAX, another Mew V to put into play. And even has an Ultra Ball in the hand to thin the hand out a little bit more. And there it is, that Forest Seal Stone will essentially just guarantee the knockout at this point. And yeah, just gonna continue this Genesect Fusion Strike system train up. And like I mentioned at the end of Game 1, the longer you hold on to that Forest Seal Stone, the more you can continue to push your aggression, have that get out of jail free card. We still have 2 more Fusion Strike systems to go. Can't really ask for more here if you're Vance on turn 2.
Yeah, I mean, with the Forest Seal Stone means it's also guaranteed.
Yeah, of course.
You can get a knockout. So if you're Dan, I think this is where you need to start evaluating things. Think, how good do I think this matchup is? Should I just concede and try to play for a win? Or should I let this play out a little bit? If you feel like you might be okay with the tie, you're not confident in this matchup, maybe you just make your opponent play it out and then you see what happens from here. But these are important decisions to be making in the middle of these games. If you're trying to get wins and match points to advance to top 8, this is where I think, it's not like you're guaranteed to lose, but you can look at this situation and be like, okay, how often do I really win this game? If it's not very often, just say, okay, you got this one. Let's move on to Game 3.
It does flip tails in the Cram. Cram-O-Matic, so 6 more cards, as we've mentioned, with that Forest Seal Stone, Star Alchemy power. It will be all but guaranteed, and there's the double turbo energy, and we'll just play the Cram-O-Matic. I would honestly just save the Cram-O-Matic here. You've already got the card you're really looking for. It's just an extra out to maybe path the peak, and this is just insult to injury at this point.
Yep.
And with the clock winding down to just over 20 minutes at this point, with a huge time taken, 25 minutes really in that first game, is it worth Dan continuing? Well, we're going to see what these cards look like. They're not too great, just really relying off this Nest Ball and Concealed cards to find some pieces. But the thing to really note at this point, though, if both players do draw, it puts them on a literal win and in on their last match. So it's not detrimental to their berth into top 8, but it is a little bit less leeway, especially when both want to have that security to guarantee themselves a spot that final round.
Yep, so Dan deciding to play this one out, at least, dig for a few more cards. Maybe if the turn doesn't go very well, could see it be the end. But Gonna see, all right, how well do I draw for this?
The third one, but I'm just going to scoop it up. You guys can obviously enforce a penalty if you'd like.
Dan saying, you know, I accidentally saw the third card.
I was going to
Understand if there's a penalty, but either way, I'm going to concede this game because he saw the 2 cards and said, nope, I'm done.
I mean, I'm sitting on like kill your next Tina.
Vance is like, yeah, it doesn't matter what you have. I have everything that I need in my hands. So, Vance sort of justifying there that the game is going to play out pretty much in my favor. No comeback here for Dan in game number 2.
Yep.
Kyle are going to game number 3.
Fully support this decision to make sure that we get to a 3rd game and get a winner in this match.
And I will go first.
Love to see it.
Love to see. I don't like to see people losing games, but I do like to see some smart awareness in terms of picking their cards up. So Dan will have the option to go first or second in this game as we near into game number 3. We saw Dan come back. Is there maybe a different route where he doesn't have to fall behind as much? I mean, you want to speak of falling behind. This is prime example. Prime Giratina textbook start sometimes.
Yeah. This game was just not close. Don't know what else to say. There's no Battle VIP pass for Dan.
Is that the secret? Is it just play Battle VIP pass and win?
Not quite that easy. Some people might lead you to believe that's how the game works, but it's not. But obviously, if you only get 1 basic down on your bench and your only Giratina gets knocked out turn 2, yeah, that's tough to come back.
I basically had 2 win-and-ins for my
Very much so.
Dan saying he's basically got 2 win-and-ins for his invite. So if he makes it to top 8, I'm assuming he'll get enough championship points to make it to the World Championships. So very high stakes game for Dan.
And early on in the season, too. So Dan having a very stellar season. Vance as well. 2 top-level players in the game. How will this pan out? Big opening hands for both of these players. We need to see some explosive starts, some Battle VIP pass, some basic Pokemon put into play. Sure, Dan will be kicking things off. Now, against his Fusion Strike deck, sometimes they'll want to go ahead and get that turn 1 attack, but both players want to go first, so... See the prize cards, nothing too relevant. The pal pad can be a little bit annoying later on. I think we're going to have a good 3rd match here, Kyle.
Yep,
things are right underway and already sort of a tough choice for Dan. Decides to get rid of that jet energy. Really good in those early turns and allowing you to use more flower selectings, but I don't blame him when your other card is Path to the Peak. Such an important card, especially on turn 1 versus this Mew VMAX deck.
Yeah, but no Battle VIP pass in hand once again. Just a nest ball to kick things off, and Dan will be faced with the decision. Do I go for Radiant Greninja? Do I go for Comfey to get another flower selecting? Do I grab a Giratina V? That one sounds worse. But the next couple cards on the top of Dan's deck could decide what direction this game goes in.
So an important choice here, of course, Dan checking what resources are available, things like the energy cards total, what Pokemon are in the deck. Radiant Greninja did decide to show up this time, but it will be the Comfey. Understands getting to 10 cards in the Lost Zone. It is priority number 1 to make sure that, of course, that Star Requiem VSTAR power is all fulfilled, those 10 cards in the Lost Zone. And we'll see what these 2 cards off flower selecting are. Battle VIP Pass, a great card, getting these Giratina V into play, especially as you said in game 1 on the 2nd turn. Try and get them evolved and increase that HP a little bit.
Okay, big flower selecting and a big miss.
And
that's okay. Well, we got Giratina.
And then we're going to pass over to you.
So 1 evolved, potentially next turn, nothing too bad. But what does his hand look like for Vance? Does have Battle VIP pass. It's got to be a little bit of insult to injury here on Dan's sort of lackluster start at this point. But there is still that Path to the Peak in play, so that's the second question here for Vance. Do you have the cards to remove that out of play, have this explosive start this Mew VMAX deck can have, and then keep that steam going for the rest of the game? We saw Vance keep it up 80% of the match, but it was faltering that last 20% that allowed Dan to come back, and it's definitely what Vance wants to avoid here in this final game.
Yep, and as Vance is searching through the deck, do want to note that Dan was given a double prize loss penalty for the last game, since did see that 3rd card off of the flower selecting or the concealed card, whichever one it was, but it was assigned to the last game.
Okay.
So will not impact this 3rd game, but do want to note that that did happen kind of as Dan was conceding the game. But yeah, Battle VIP pass for Vance. Dan's got to be jealous seeing that. But if you're Vance, I think, well, geez, first of all, kind of an awkward hand. There's a couple paths to the peak, got some lost vacuums, but
You're still in the VIP search, right?
this is going to be a tricky one to play out. But if you're Vance, you just want to play as much stuff as you can and then judge, try to disrupt your opponent, and set yourself up for the next turn.
Yeah, this is tough because those lost vacuum are important resources down the line later on in this game. And while you might have to play them to draw some cards off the Genesect, I don't even think there's actually a second Pokemon tool or stadium card to remove at this point. So we're just going to see Path put into both players' Lost Zone.
Is that it? He's just gonna
I think that just has to be it.
Yikes.
Oh, playing a Path of his own down, getting rid of this Mew VMAX, and we're drawing
three cards.
What do you think about burning the power tablet there to draw an extra one?
I think he just feels like he's got to go fast, so let's do it.
Said 5 in hand.
5 in hand.
Now an interesting choice here. Do you attach this Fusion Energy card to maybe your Mew V to give that a potential power-up option, or do you play the Judge that was found off this first Fusion Strike system?
You can also Ultra Ball all the cards away and get another Genesect. Vance has asked several times now how many cards in your hand, and Dan says it's 5. So Vance trying to figure out, is it worth playing a Judge? Could I just be improving my opponent's hand in this situation? And yeah, decides to Ultra Ball away the Judge and say, okay, I'm just going to get another Genesect V, keep using Fusion Strike system. Now there are 4 Fusion Strike Pokemon in play, so draw up to 4 cards. Now, if you just find one more Battle VIP pass, hey, this turn's perfect.
So let's see it here for Vance. Let's find another Mew V.
Sure.
Good Pokemon to have down. And honestly, this hand is pretty solid. You've got the power tablet for next turn, potentially a Judge. And Vance will actually just go ahead and play it, maybe looking for Boss's Orders on the following turn as a supporter. And Dan's sort of revealing the bad news for Vance that the hand wasn't ideal. Doesn't mean things can change with flower selecting. So both players going to draw 4 cards. Vance does still have a Fusion Strike system available. And as you mentioned, key turn to play Battle VIP Pass, not just to get these Pokemon into play, but to also get that card out of your hand so that you don't draw into it later where it's unplayable.
All right, so very strong start. Looked a little shaky at the beginning for Vance, but now has drawn out of it pretty well. You'd love to see an energy attachment here. We'll see the Swing Heavy Ball to look at the prize cards. But yeah, basically, after the Judge, you just want to try to set yourself up best you can to attack on turn 2. Judge disrupts your opponent. You just want to set it up so that next turn you get a knockout and put on the pressure.
I just put it in here.
And perfect Pokemon to find there off that Hisuian Heavy Ball. 3rd Mew V to put into play. An ideal board for Vance here in game number 3. And an ideal start. Did have to burn one of those power tablets this turn. Not exactly what you're looking for, but if you told me this was going to be his start with how awkward that first turn looked with the, or rather how this turn looked with the hand, I think this is an okay spot to be in. I think the choice now for Vance is, do you want to play this switch card, just put one of these Mew V in the active spot where you'll be safe, or do you want to hold on to it? And choice will be to just hold the switch card for next turn. Not much else in this hand, though.
I was trying to figure out, you know, if you switch card into the Mew, I mean, you could get hit by Cramorant, which could turn out being awkward later. You could also end up in an awkward situation where it's very unlikely, but if your opponent plays Boss's Orders and like brings a Genesect back out, it could potentially stop you from attacking. So Vance deciding to hold on to the switch card. Can also heal off damage. You know, if the Genesect takes a hit from a Cramorant, could potentially end up being relevant later on. So yeah, lots of difficult decisions. You know, Mew VMAX sometimes has very tough choices like that. Just like Lost Zone decks have a lot of tough choices, and those little things can come back to matter later in the game.
Another tough choice. Does have to get rid of that Iono. There is a Nest Ball in hand, but I think Dan is just making some smart choices to just wait and play the Nest Ball, maximize the outs of finding basic Pokemon here off of this Comfey flower selecting. None there. So we'll put Dan up to 7 cards in the Lost Zone, so Mirage Gate is now available. We are going to see the Nest Ball probably for the second Giratina V into play. And
he said it's going to be a bold move. Ethan, do you think we're going to see an Abyss Seeking this turn?
I think with how Dan's hand is shaped out, you've got to kind of give yourself the best options and understand that Vance, whether you like it to or not, is going to take a knockout on this Giratina V. Now, whether it's disrupting your hand or not, I think that's the big risk.
Oh, there it is.
And this is sort of calculated here from Dan. You did see your opponent play 2 Judge at this point. They have one in the discard pile and one already there. They most likely have 1 copy of Judge left in their deck, and this is the risk you have to take sometimes. Fall behind early, but build your Lost Zone up, find cards, continue to set these Giratina V up into VSTAR Pokemon. This is a big break for Vance. This knockout is almost handed to him on a silver platter. Just needs a damage modifier, VMAX, double turbo energy.
But look at his hand.
Wait, is this?
It's just full of like power tablets and junk. Just got an escape rope.
There's an Alessa Sparkle. I mean, you can just play that to play it. You really love to play something else like that last copy of Judge. There's no other, no other option. Has to play a pretty mediocre supporter card in this Alessa Sparkle. Does find 2 fusion energy, putting them onto these Mew V. It's not really going to do anything because of how this ends up working. There's only 2 fusion energy in there, so there's just actually the 1 in the deck anyway. So just going to put it onto the Mew V. And yeah, it just kind of comes down to how much can you thin this hand without burning all of these resources.
Does he play a power tablet? Yep. I think that's 2 down at this point.
But the big question here is, I mean, you can play this Path to the Peak down and Lost Vacuum it away, but that's going to be your 3rd Lost Vacuum down. You're only going to have 1 remaining.
Yeah, these are all important resources. Sometimes you just need to throw cards away to thin your hand so you can draw back up with the Fusion Strike system. But late in the game, you do need those Lost Vacuums. So, okay, looks like the first one is going to find a Forest Sealstone, and that is going to smooth everything out.
Well, not quite, though, because it still needs to find 2 pieces here with this hand. You need the double turbo energy and the Mew VMAX, and
yeah, but it improves
of
your
course,
odds
it's a great card to find. It's just not the full piece yet. I think that's what Vance is sort of understanding at this point. I mean, do you take a risk and draw just 1 card off this Fusion Strike system again? Or do you burn this 3rd Lost Vacuum? I mean, the thing, too, is that this hand is just kind of awkward in terms of what you would have to do. I guess there is technically a path. Is there a path to peak? There is a path to the peak. So, I mean, you can get rid of something like the Box of Disasters, but no, it's going to be a 2nd power tablet burned, an unnecessary resource played, but finding 2 cards, is there a double turbo or a Mew VMAX? And there is, and that's a huge find for Vance.
Trying to figure out where to attach. You can technically attach the other Fusion Strike energy to that Mew V later, so may as well.
I think it was discarded turn 1, though.
Oh,
That was the problem, yeah.
Well, you can energy mix, you know.
We're mixing out here, mixing it up. I don't know if energy mix is a winning strategy, so to say, but
probably
you
not.
never could. You could give yourself some double turbos here and there, and we'll just be the Forest Sealstone used, Star Alchemy, and yes, of course, Vance did get this knockout, but again, had to use this Forest Sealstone early on, and already through a couple power tablets, 2 Lost Vacuum. These are all resources that will matter towards the end of the game.
Vance did do the important thing, got the knockout on the Giratina VSTAR, takes the prize card lead here, and now Dan will need to respond. There are a lot of cards in the Lost Zone already. Should be able to get to that 10 this turn. Another tough choice off the flower, selecting a Chorus and a Boss's Orders.
Now, the way
Looking
Dan
through
has
to see.
built this deck, there are both 2 Boss's Orders and 2 Countercatcher. We usually don't see 4 total Gusting cards in this deck. But it will be Boss going to the Lost Zone. Chorus's Experiment, the supporter card of choice.
Lots of energy in the Lost Zone as well.
Yeah.
Some awkward decisions for Dan, and this does come up sometimes, and even more energy into the Lost Zone. Was it like 4 or 5 energy in there already?
I think so. Dan's gonna sort of hide it in embarrassment from how many Lost Zone, how many energy are in the Lost Zone there. A couple Jet Energy, a whole rainbow of the couple of types, the 3 types of energy that are in this deck for Dan. And does have Sableye. This will put Dan up to more than enough cards in the Lost Zone at this point. So Lost Mine is available, Star Requiem is available. Just kind of comes down to how do you want to time this out. And it looks like it's going to actually be a similar line in game number 1, minus that Genesect. We'll use this Mirage Gate to power Sableye up, and we could just see this Lost Mine put 3 damage counters on the Mew VMAX and some of these benched Mew V to set them up for potentially a 2-turn window of winning the game. Lost Impact into Star Requiem. Is that what Dan needs to do to keep up with Vance's aggression at this point?
Yeah, it seems like a solid line of play. I think the The big thing is you need to worry about switch cart. You know, if you put exactly 3 damage counters on a MUV, you could potentially run into a situation where switch cart heals off some of the damage. Could make it awkward. And part of it, you know, if your opponent is able to do, you know, the ultimate move, knock out your Giratina VSTAR, this all falls apart pretty quickly. So at this point, I mean, if you're Dan, you do what you can. You set up for, you know, 2 attacks to win after this. The Star Requiem and then the Lost Impact. But it doesn't feel good. You know, if your opponent finds Choice Belt and then 2 more Power Tablets and then Boss's Orders to go after your Giratina VSTAR, I mean, that's got to be it, right?
So there's the Power Tablet, third one being played. We are actually going to see the Choice Belt go onto the benched Mew.
Oh, okay, just a judge.
Interesting choice to play the Power Tablet, as Vance pretty much given up on potentially taking a one-hit knockout on this Giratina VSTAR from here on out.
Yeah, it depends on how many are left. If
Yeah, that's fine. In that case, let me do that for you.
if there's only 1 Power Tablet left, it really doesn't matter that you have any, because it's not enough to get to a knockout on a Giratina VSTAR.
Just to confirm.
Yeah, these are tricky games to try to figure out at this point.
It could also be something like the Psychic Leap to take a knockout on this Comfey. That's also a potential option. So, I mean, Vance doesn't necessarily need to leave a Mew VMAX in the active. That's what's so great about this Mew VMAX deck. So many different attacks to copy, even in a deck so limited where you're only playing 2 different Pokemon. It's going to be a Tails, though, off of that Cryptomatic. Could find some pieces for the following turns. We do see the double Turbo Energy. And now I think this is the choice for Vance. Are we going to see this active Mew V attack? No, we're actually just going to see this go onto the benched Mew V. And we'll see the last Fusion Strike system. Just draw an additional card. It is a Boss's Orders for next turn. And it is actually just going to be that Psychic Leap, but instead, with the Mew VMAX, bringing this Mew V up, and Vance is pretty much trying to put Dan onto a 3-turn window instead of a 2-turn window. Very smart awareness from our world champion, Vance Kelley.
Definitely. And now Dan in a tough spot, throws away the other Boss's Orders.
Has to keep that Super Rod, knows that there's already so many energy in the Lost Zone, and a big Pokegear. 7 cards, Vance is now in Roxanne range. Dan can disrupt this hand. Doesn't find it, though. Just a Colress's Experiment. That's not bad, but is okay. Mediocre, just going to cut it here for Dan.
Doesn't feel like it, but I don't know. Vance can't win on the next turn, which is, you know, a breath of relief for Dan. Yeah, this is tricky. It does feel like this was the turn you really needed to go for the hand disruption. Roxanne, path to the peak, but unable to do that.
We'll still look at 5 cards here. Does find the path to the peak off of this, but it's a really awkward final card that has to go to the Lost Zone. The Cramorant's sort of an easy choice, but you've got Counter Catcher. You want to keep that available since both your boss are gone. You need to keep your energy cards. You've already thrown away your last Grass Energy is here in these 5 cards. And you need the Path to the Peak to try and buy yourself some turns to keep up with the aggression Vance is putting on. And it will be the Mirage Gate, the target of choice to go to the Lost Zone. Important questions for me here is, what attack does Dan want to use? I mean, you can use Lost Impact, but will you have the resources to still take these last prizes with 5 or so energy in the Lost Zone? Looking for more, though. We'll see this Greninja get benched and does find an important switch card, which will allow this Comfey to get out of the active spot, maybe saving some energy cards for later.
Did draw the Roxanne for next turn. Oh, no. That was a wrong card. But, yeah, is able to at least get a knockout here. You have to think that Lost Impact is going to be the attack of choice. Then you can set up for the Star Requiem on the next turn. Is there a path to the peak? There is. Yeah, this is the late game scenario, basically from game 1. Ooh, Counter Catcher on the Choice Belted Mew to potentially take away easy knockouts in the future.
Yeah, and the way that this has worked out for Vance is because of all of these modifiers being burned, if Dan doesn't put another easy 2-prize Pokemon like a Giratina V into play, it's going to take Vance 3 turns to take these final 3 prize cards. Because at quickest, this Giratina V will take 2 turns to be knocked out, and then you'll have to take an additional turn to take another attack. What looked to be pretty bad for Dan at this point. seeing Giratina VSTAR's comeback potential, but a great hand here for Vance. Has the lost vacuum, can get out of this path to the peak. That's one more resource gone for Dan. He can draw some cards up. We do see this fusion energy be brought up, and it's actually going to be Boss's Orders on the Sableye. So as long as there's an energy card off of these 5 cards or future cards with Fusion Strike system, we can see a knockout be taken. But this is just another sort of awkward looking hand. You don't really want to play this last lost vacuum. This is your final out to path the peak. And you can't play any of these supporter cards. You can't play the Battle VIP pass. This is looking pretty awkward here for Vance.
One awkward thing for Dan, though, he's out of Boss's Orders. So if he ever gets in a situation where he has to use Star Requiem, he goes down to 1 prize card. Won't have access to Counter Catcher. Ooh, this is weird. Time has been called at this point, so the game's got to end in the next, this is turn 0 plus 3 turns. We could hit some awkward scenarios here.
Yeah, and with time being called, if Vance's turn 0 at this point, then Vance doesn't have a way to win this game with the amount of resources that are available. Dan, in theory, though, with 2 turns, can take a knockout with Star Requiem and take a knockout with Lost Impact. So this is maybe a situation where Vance may have to sort of reassess his position because, like I mentioned earlier in the round, a tie for both these players puts them in a situation where they can still make top cut. A loss, however, eliminates them from contention. And I think the idea that we're trying to figure out at this point is how things are playing out. It looks like we're just checking some things out on the stream, just taking a little bit of a review. So we'll figure out what our situation looks like and make sure to inform everybody.
Yeah, Judge, checking a discard pile real quick. There was a chance that a power tablet was accidentally shuffled into the deck, but the judge is checking the discard pile, seeing that seems like they're all there. So we are good. Going to move on to this game.
But it will be the final power tablet being brought into the hand. Now the question is, are we going to see another Psychic Leap this turn to bring the Mew VMAX out of play? I think we're just making sure everything is settled. Looks like we're all good to resume. We're all good to continue this game out.
Looks like we are going to pause the match.
Never mind.
I know you said we're all good.
We're not good. Never mind.
We're not there yet. We're going to pause the match real quick so the judges can review something going on in the game. Yeah, lots of cards fly around in these matchups, especially Mew VMAX. You draw lots of cards, play lots of power tablets, items, all sorts of stuff throughout the match. So judge is just going to take a look back, make sure that everything is following proper procedures, and we'll go from there. We'll give you updates as we have them.
This is an intense final game. I'm excited to see how this plays out. The time is almost called at this point, too. So, I mean, if we're seeing the board that we just saw at this point, if things resolve out, then Vance would be turn 0. So that means that, like we said, Vance is not in a winning position anymore to close this game out with only having 2 turns remaining to finish things out. Dan, however, potentially could with the hard-hitting power of Giratina VSTAR. Hasn't used that VSTAR power, the Star Requiem, yet. It's going to be interesting to see how things play out.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any echoing horn ways like that for Vance to get kind of that cheap last 2 prize knockout. So it's going to be difficult to close out. But I think there are some awkward scenarios that Dan could be put in as we reach the end of this game. So it's definitely not over yet. There's also lots of energy in Dan's Lost Zone. Might be low on resources. So I don't know, still anybody's game. Obviously, we're going to wait to see what the result is of this judge review. But
I'm just going to leave. Just to
we'll
avoid
go
any
for
issues, I'm just going to leave and tie it up so there's no shenanigans. Because I can't,
here's some chatter at the table.
So I can
Players
still win, though.
kind of discussing what to
So
do from here.
I'm getting word right now that it seems that Vance accidentally put a power tablet back into his deck. So let's check what happened here. So Mew VMAX went up, Psychic Leap, and you see it right there. The power tablet got picked up and accidentally put back in the deck here for Vance. We'll have to see what the ruling is on a complicated situation. There's the Mew VMAX, gets picked
Oh,
up
yeah, look at
and
that.
grabs that power tablet along with it. Just Vance not really paying attention to that card next to the Mew VMAX and putting it in a pretty weird situation at this point where we're going to have to resolve what something complicated like this looks like.
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky one for the judges to resolve. You have to think some sort of penalty will be issued. It was pretty clear there. I mean, seems like an accident, like nothing malicious, but hey, that's not how Psychic Leap works.
Imagine if it was just like all power tablets you played come back with you every turn. You would just
yeah, you don't
loop
attach
back and
them
forth.
to your Pokemon.
It's like plus power back in the
Yeah,
day, right?
exactly. Yep. So yeah, I did think, I was thinking like, isn't he out of power tablets? And then got another one out of the deck. So yeah, we'll be on standby here as we try to resolve the situation, figure out where to go from here. Obviously, if a penalty is assessed, then it's going to be an easy win for Dan at this point. Say Star Requiem or whatever the case is, but yeah, tough. Tough. You don't love to see stuff like this, and it's always awkward to see. But
And I'm
looks
just gonna
like that
double check.
is.
I think that's the game, though. I think,
Dan is going to take this one.
yeah, it's just unfortunate to see things play like that. It was a really good game, a really close game 3, and because of that penalty, Dan will advance to 10-0-4. One tie will put him at 35 match points, and with how things are playing out, should be pretty good to potentially lock up a spot at top cut and